Alden family. Their greed knows no bounds. This is how the story goes. The Aldens are known for their dirty business deals, leaving a trail of chaos and destruction wherever they go. How does this story involve another powerful and wealthy family, you might wonder? Well, you're about to find out. Stay tuned till the end to see how these two families entangle and collide. Amara bought a modest apartment near Beacon Hill, a place where cobblestones met the sea breeze. It was far from the sprawling mansions of her parents' world, but the silence of the walls wasn't mocking anymore. Here, memories didn't linger, hopes didn't burn, and for the first time in her life, Amara was able to breathe. Inside, amidst the dust of neglect and chipped paint, she remade herself. She signed up for evening classes at Bunker Hill Community College, enrolled in a barista course, and even taught herself to code. Every line of JavaScript, every cup of pour-over coffee, was a brick in the castle of her new life. And it wasn't perfect. Not by a long shot. There were days when sleep felt harder to come by than food, when the silence stretched into aching loneliness, and the fear of being discovered kept her awake until dawn. But with each sunrise, she pushed back. The real Amara was buried deeper than any grave. The scars remained, but they became maps of strength instead of weakness. Her journey caught the attention of Professor James Daly, head of the computer science department and himself an ex-CEO who had left the rat race for academia. He saw in Amara brilliance that had been honed and hidden. Underneath the quiet exterior, he became her mentor, opening doors to hackathons, coding competitions, and eventually to prestigious labs at MIT. "You have a rare gift, Amara," he told her once, his weathered hands gripping his cane. "A mind that sees patterns where others see chaos. You must wield that carefully. Power like yours can build or break empires." His words echoed in her ears, sharper than any warning, sweeter than any praise. Amara absorbed knowledge hungrily, relishing in the anonymity of a crowd. She competed, coded, networked, and won. But always, she guarded herself. She dated casually, drifted from one rental to another, and never stayed long enough anywhere to form roots. Every so often, though, she found herself staring at the wrong window, half expecting to see cobblestones turn into wrought iron gates, the gentle hum of traffic replaced by the cawing of crows. And then she'd shake her head, reminding herself that Boston was not home, was not solace, and should never be. "Trust me, you don't want to miss this." At 26, she made a move that shocked the financial world. She took down a tech giant, publicly exposing a series of data leaks that had evaded regulators for years. The company plummeted and her reputation soared. Overnight, she was courted by everyone from venture capitalists to senators, offered speaking gigs at industry summits, and interviewed by journalists hungry for a glimpse of the mysterious Blackwell. But she turned it all down, vanishing from the public eye and doubling down on her mission. Every article, every tweet, every blog post she produced exposed more layers of corporate rot. One by one, powerful companies crumbled under her scrutiny, leaving investors bewildered and economies in turmoil. For her, it wasn't just about making money or taking down corporations. It was about wielding power. Power to carve her own path, power to rewrite the rules, and power to punish those who preyed on the weak. She moved again, this time to the Upper West Side of Manhattan. It was a far cry from the glitz of Park Avenue, but she liked the mix of old and new here. The neighborhood echoed with history, but throbbed with a modern beat. It was where legends were born, where ideas fermented, and where fortunes were made and lost in whispers. Her new apartment had high ceilings, oversized windows, and creaky floorboards that sang with every footfall. The walls were lined with bookshelves, and the radiators hummed like old friends. It was the perfect place for an artist to lose themselves in the ether, to conjure empires out of solitude and moonlight. The city itself was a challenge she couldn't resist. The pulse of commerce, the heartbeat of ambition, the constant churn of opportunity and despair. Here, she wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. She pursued ventures like the Stingray, swift, sleek, dangerous, targeting the fattest, juiciest morsels of wealth. Her social circle expanded, but she kept it intimate, inviting only those whose eyes shone with ambition. There were artists, activists, scientists, and yes, even a retired cop with a haunted gaze and a past as tangled as her own. Together, they formed a constellation, bound not by blood or money, but by shared battles and hard-won victories. Her life was a whirlwind of dinners in Chinatown, debates in Harlem, and strategizing in her sun-drenched apartment with its view of Central Park. The world she inhabited buzzed with energy. They didn't shy away from grand plans or audacious dreams. They debated, they fought, they fell in love, and they healed. Amara reveled in the freedom, the anonymity, the chance to be whoever she wanted without the shadow of her past catching up. This was New York, the land of reinvention, where broken hearts mended and lonely souls found solace. It was a haven for dreamers, a shelter for the damned, and a proving ground for the gifted. In the vibrant chaos of the city, Amara Blackwell became a force to be reckoned with. She played the game on Wall Street with a ferocity that startled veterans. She led political campaigns that shook foundations. She funded research that broke barriers. She did it all with style, with grace, and with an unwavering resolve that set her apart from the rest. But it was also in New York that the echoes of her past grew the loudest, where the ghosts of her childhood seemed to whisper warnings on the coldest nights. And it was here, in the heart of the concrete jungle, that the tapestry of her destiny began to unravel. Meanwhile, the Vanderbilts, America's first family, had fallen from grace. Once upon a time, their name echoed in marble halls. Their wealth was measured in monopolies and industries, but now their name was synonymous with scandals and controversies. Vanderbilt had been stripped bare by the merciless claws of justice, leaving them wounded, vulnerable, and desperate for a comeback. What happens when two powerful families cross paths? Will it be a collision of ambitions or an alliance forged in necessity? You'll have to wait and see. But before we move on, let us know your thoughts about the story so far. Do you think Amara will confront her past or continue to run away from it? Will she expose the Vanderbilt family's corruption? Only time will tell. And to find out what happens next, click on the video that pops up on your screen right now. Make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Until then, stay curious and keep watching. We'll be waiting for you. The crisp air held the promise of winter, and in the towering glass lobby of Caldwell Pierce, the city lights twinkled like fallen stars trapped in concrete and steel. Here, among the marble and mahogany, lives were mapped out in charts and projections. Power was measured in mergers and acquisitions, all under the watchful gaze of bronze statues commemorating deals that had reshaped industries and destinies. The perfect setting, thought Amara, to receive a house guest. She smoothed the burgundy fabric of her dress, adjusting the single diamond pendant at her throat. It was more than jewelry. It was a reminder of her history, a silent witness to the game she'd mastered. But tonight, there was tension in the air, a gathering storm in the glint of polished brass and crystal chandeliers. She had expected opposition, but not quite like this. Alden Vance arrived looking like a predator who had stalked his prey for too long. Every line of his lean face, every fold in his impeccably tailored suit spoke of focused anger. He wasted no time with pleasantries, cutting straight to the chase. "So you called me here to discuss my sister's company." There was no mistaking the undercurrent of accusation in his voice. "We both know this city plays hardball. I thought we agreed to stay above that, and I would have," Amara said evenly, her voice a carefully calibrated instrument. "But you have a unique advantage here. The best man for the job." The ghost they made. The corners of Vance's lips twitched, but it wasn't a smile. "Evelyn is out of the picture." "She is not." Amara leaned back, meeting his gaze with cool certainty. "She won't be silenced." "Then I hope you're prepared to lose everything." "All of it." "She chose this. She refused my advice." "Fine. Then she faces the consequences." Amara didn't flinch. "She will face them with you." "That makes no sense." "I think it does." Amara rose from her seat, striding toward the window where the cityscape glittered like a trap of scattered jewels. "We don't actually have to destroy each other. We could be partners. In destroying my sister's future?" The sheer venom in his voice made her turn around. Never had she seen such raw emotion on his usually impassive face. "She's already destroyed," he added quietly, staring back at the glittering skyline. "By our parents. By this city. She doesn't need you to finish the job." His words echoed in the vast emptiness of the lobby. Amara felt a flicker of something akin to sympathy. His pain was evident, the wounds of a shared past laid bare. But sympathy was a luxury she couldn't afford. She had her own ghosts to chase. "You mistake me for someone I'm not. I came here to offer you a chance to stop this madness before it starts. Don't patronize me." The quiet danger in his voice was a stark reminder of how far things could go. But there was a challenge in his eyes that she couldn't resist. "Very well. she said smoothly. Then let's lay out our cards. Explain to me how you plan to save what's left of your family. The night was filled with revelations, not just about the intricate plans unfolding in the city's financial core, but about the men they'd become. Vance, ambitious and haunted, shaped by the same forces that had crafted her into the woman she was. Amara, relentless, unyielding, willing to sacrifice everything for a future that felt more like vengeance than evolution. As the hours passed, their paths twisted together like vines, reaching for the same elusive light. The city slept, oblivious to the intricate dance of power and ambition playing out in its concrete jungle. The deal they finally struck was a fragile truce, a balancing act on the edge of a knife. Vance would buy her silence regarding the letter, ensuring Evelyn's continued safety. In return, she would provide intelligence on Alden, gathering the evidence he needed to take down his brother's empire. Neither woman realized the cost of the bargain, the sacrifices it demanded, or the lengths to which the others would go to win. A month later, the penthouse buzzed with activity. Lawyers and accountants scurried about, poring over documents, their voices hushed but urgent. The walls were lined with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city, a silent spectator to the power play happening within. Evelyn stood amidst the controlled chaos, watching the ebb and flow of numbers on the screen. It was a stark contrast to the quiet life she'd built for herself, but there was a new resolve in her eyes, a steely determination born of necessity and pride. The task force Amara had assembled was nothing short of brilliant. A mix of outsiders and loyalists, united by a common goal, revenge. Each member was a specialist in dismantling empires, burying secrets, and rewriting narratives. And Evelyn, though new to this world, fit right in. Amara, true to her word, had provided invaluable insights into Alden's operations, exposing weak points and vulnerabilities that allowed the task force to strike with surgical precision. Meanwhile, Noah worked tirelessly, organizing the logistics, pulling strings in the shadows, making sure every move was timed perfectly. Each day brought new developments, each week chipped away at Alden's seemingly impenetrable armor. Yet even in the face of mounting success, there were moments of doubt, times when the weight of what they were doing threatened to pull them under. But then Evelyn would catch sight of the determined set of Amara's jaw, the fierce focus in Noah's eyes, and she would remember why she was here. This wasn't just about bringing down a ruthless tycoon. It was about tearing down the very foundation of a dynasty built on deceit. It was about justice for her mother, for the countless victims of Alden's machinations, and most importantly, for themselves. As the final weeks ticked by, the stakes grew higher, the risks more dangerous. But with each challenge, the bond between the three tightened. They were soldiers in a silent war, fighting not just for a piece of the pie, but for the right to carve their own future in the face of adversity. Their unity was a beacon in the darkness, a promise that no matter what secrets the past unearthed, they would face it together. Because in the grand theater of corporate espionage, betrayal, and buried secrets, they had found something rare, a purpose that transcended personal gain and led them towards an uncertain dawn. They fought side by side, strategizing late into the nights, fueled by coffee and the thrill of the chase. Theirs was a symphony of calculated moves and silent takedowns. In the high-stakes world of corporate espionage, they moved like phantoms, exploiting loopholes, uncovering hidden assets, and orchestrating public relations nightmares for their target. Through it all, Alden remained elusive, a puppet master pulling strings from behind the curtain. But with every passing day, the net tightened. And as his empire began to crumble, his enemies became bolder. The task force took hits, suffered setbacks, and faced threats both subtle and overt. But these challenges only served to strengthen their resolve, forging a bond that ran deeper than ambition or personal gain. They were in it for the long haul, willing to endure the bumps along the road because the destination promised retribution and perhaps a glimmer of hope in a world shrouded in darkness. As the battle intensified, so did the personal stakes. Secrets from their past surfaced, threatening to derail their mission. Trust became a luxury they could no longer afford, forcing them to question not just their enemies, but also themselves. Nevertheless, they pressed on, driven by a thirst for justice and the unwavering belief in their cause. In the shadowy realm where morals blurred and survival hinged on calculated risks, they fought. And as the final showdown approached, the question wasn't whether they would win, but at what cost. Because in the game of corporate espionage, the victors often bear scars that run deeper than the wounds of the vanquished. And as the pieces fell into place on the elaborate chessboard of deceit, they were about to find out just how high the price of vengeance could climb. What happens when a gentle girl becomes a force of reckoning? Keep watching. And don't forget to subscribe. Evelyn woke before dawn. The house was still asleep, but Evelyn could feel its heartbeat beneath the floorboards. Every creak, every shifting shadow seemed to whisper one thing: you're not supposed to know. But she did, and that knowledge had begun to change her. She wasn't angry in the way people often imagine women to be: loud, irrational, aflame. No, her anger was precise. It lived in her spine and moved through her limbs like a second pulse. It shaped her breath. It made her see clearly. It didn't ask for justice. It would make justice. The first place she went that morning wasn't the kitchen or the parlor. It was the basement. A cold, damp, long-forgotten corner of the estate that no one entered since her grandfather's death. But Evelyn remembered at age 9, she had wandered down here once, chasing a cat. What she found instead was a locked door with no handle and the scent of old metal and memory. This time, she brought the key. It had been sewn into the lining of her mother's travel cloak. She'd found it the night before, while searching for the deed to the house. Her mother had hidden it there just as she had hidden the truth for a time when Evelyn would be ready. And Evelyn was ready. The next few days were a blur of activity for Selene, each moment carefully calibrated. She moved through a series of meticulously planned encounters, ensuring the right facts reached the right ears, while keeping her own lips sealed. Her face became a mask of polite concern, asking after her Uncle Charles's health, inquiring about the progress of the family business. But behind that facade, she was orchestrating a storm. First, she paid a visit to her Aunt Vivian, the icy matriarch who had weathered so many corporate battles alongside her husband. Selene had chosen her words carefully when speaking to the board, letting them know that she'd discovered inconsistencies in the will. She stopped just short of accusations, allowing her aunt to fill in the blanks with her imagination. When Aunt Vivian confronted her, there was no anger, only veiled threats. Selene responded with carefully feigned naivety, making sure her aunt knew she could easily take the matter to the courts. But she wasn't interested in dragging the family name through the mud. It was a masterful game of chess where Selene was sacrificing pawns to get her queen into position. Her goal wasn't to expose her uncle yet. It was to put him on edge, and she had managed to do just that. Now, leaning back in the antique chair in her aunt's boudoir surrounded by priceless art, Selene knew the seeds of doubt had been planted. Then there was Adrian Graves, her cousin and rival. Selene sought him out at one of his underground fight clubs, a place where men wagered not just money, but power. Adrian was a study in contrasts, brute strength and calculated moves. While he pummeled his opponent in the ring, Selene watched, waiting for her turn. She knew Adrian had designs on the company, and she let him believe she was vulnerable, unaware of his intentions. Once he was done, she confronted him, laying out her suspicions about the will. His response was immediate and violent, but she stayed calm, offering him a deal. Together, they could investigate. If they found foul play, she'd leave the company to him. It was a tempting offer, but one laced with danger. Selene was well aware that Adrian wouldn't hesitate to strike her down if it meant securing his ambition. So she added another condition, a demand for an alliance, stating she'd be willing to overlook any past grievances if he promised to stand by her side. The hard, cynical look on Adrian's face told her that he was considering it, torn between his ambition and the risk of acting alone. Her gamble had paid off. Finally, there was the matter of the board itself. Selene had chosen her allies carefully, finding common ground with those who had been overlooked or slighted by her uncle. She reminded them of their shared history with her father, appealing to their sense of loyalty to the family legacy. In the weeks leading up to the big meeting, she met with them individually, dropping hints, asking questions, fanning the flames of discontent. By the time the board meeting rolled around, the stage was set. All the pieces were in place. All she needed was the spotlight. She arrived at the meeting early, wearing a tailored black pantsuit that spoke of power. Her movements were confident, her posture ramrod straight. Her hair was pulled back, revealing a determined jawline and ice-cold eyes. Every member of the board present was someone she had spoken to, someone she had prepared for this moment. They took their seats around the massive oak table, each a cog in the machine of the Graves family empire. Charles sat at the head, flanked by his loyalists, and when Selena entered the room, the murmurs ceased. All eyes were on her. She acknowledged them with a cool nod before taking her seat at the far end of the table, away from her uncle, yet positioned to command attention. For a moment, no one spoke. Charles, sensing the shift in the room, cleared his throat. "What brings you here, Selena? Surely you haven't come to pay respects to your dearly departed father." "Respects?" Selena thought bitterly. "No, I haven't. I've come to ask questions about his will." A murmur ran through the board. Charles's eyes narrowed. "Selena, your father's passing was a traumatic event for all of us. Now is not the time for accusations. But it's the perfect time for answers," she retorted. "Answers you won't provide." The words hung in the air. Everyone knew what Selena was insinuating, even if no one dared speak of it. "You wound me, child, with your accusations. Your father was my brother. How could I have harmed him?" His voice dripped with false concern. "Then explain why he died penniless, stripped of his position, cut off from the family trust fund, denied proper burial rights. Why, Uncle Charles? He made his own choices, decisions that alienated him from the family and the company. Or perhaps," Selena countered, leaning forward, "he was pushed, coerced into signing documents he didn't understand, pressured to make decisions by the very people he trusted most." The board shifted uneasily. She was treading a fine line, but her delivery was flawless, leaving just enough room for doubt. She saw cracks appearing in Charles's carefully constructed facade. His control over the board, over the company, was slipping, and she wasn't finished. "Gregory," she called out, and the family lawyer stood up, pale and shaken, his eyes darting around the room. "Tell them about the missing pages from my father's journal." The lawyer hesitated, then began to speak, his voice shaking, recounting how Charles had requested the removal of certain entries from the journal after the initial trial, entries that painted him in a negative light. As Gregory spoke, Selena watched her uncle's face tighten, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the armrests. One by one, the board members leaned forward, their expressions grim. Selena allowed herself a ghost of a smile. Now she had them on her side, or at least she had their reluctant support. Charles was losing his grip on everything, and she was only getting started. "We need to adjourn this meeting," Charles said finally, his voice tight. "There are clearly some unresolved issues." But Selena wouldn't let him escape so easily. "That won't be necessary," she said, rising to her feet. "We have the evidence right here." She gestured to the lawyer with a sweep of her arm. "Let's finish what he started." In the ensuing chaos, Selena remained calm, her voice ringing with newfound power as she recounted every instance of her father's mistreatment, of the falsified documents, of the betrayal. The board members looked at each other, their faces a mix of shock and dawning realization. Selena could see the gears turning in their minds. The meeting, which had started as a somber affair, had become a battlefield, a silent war fought with glances and subtle gestures. It was the kind of war Selena had trained for, strategized for, and she was winning. She wasn't seeking vengeance tonight. She was dismantling the machinery of her father's ruin piece by piece, accusation by accusation. When Selena spoke, her words were precise, leaving no room for evasion or denial. The Graves family empire was built on layers of deception. But tonight, the foundation was crumbling. The meeting stretched late into the night, and by the time dawn began to break, everything was irrevocably changed. Desmond Laurent lived in a penthouse 2 floors below Selene, a sprawling duplex with panoramic views of the city. But tonight, despite the high-rise luxury, he was shadowed by darkness. News of Selene's comeback was everywhere: TV screens, online feeds, even hard copy on his antique desk. Each mention a fresh cut, each click of a mouse a hammer blow. He paced, hand gripping the banister, eyes flickering with dark thoughts. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not like this. He'd made moves long ago, quietly shifted shares here, manipulated contracts there. Also that when William died, Selene, the wild card, would be neutralized. Yet somehow she survived the board meeting, uncovered Gregory, forced the family's hand. Their carefully constructed lie about William's wealth was gone. So was their credibility. It was a simple plan, really. Marry Charles's daughter, secure the loyalty of the Graves family, and eventually take control when William inevitably passed. He was loyal after all, which is why he kept watch at the hospital while William coughed up blood, signing documents that would strip Selene of her inheritance. He was patient, waiting for Selene to appear on the board, then subtly influencing decisions, nudging the family towards backing Charles's every move. No one suspected a thing, but it all went sideways when Selene came back. Now, he was sweating, his heart hammering against his ribs. Years of meticulous planning were crashing down around him, but panic wasn't his style. He wasn't born into the Lawrence to be afraid. He learned from them how to fix things, permanently. His phone buzzed. It was the real estate agent. Mr. Laurent. The voice was tight. Regarding the property on Bay Street, Miss Laurent has filed a complaint with the real estate board. She claims duress in the sale contract. Duress. Was that what Selene thought? He offered her condolences at the hospital, threatened her at the manor, pressured her at the reading. Hell no, she has witnesses, the agent continued. Her own father's attorney, Mr. Davenport, who's also deceased, and that idiot butler, Oswald, who must have been bribed. Good heavens. What was he thinking? This had to be stopped. The news of the complaint was to public. People would start connecting dots. He couldn't let Selene win. Not now. Not ever. Desmond moved through the city, not in his usual Bentley or Porsche, but in an off-the-shelf Audi. Cash payment. New plates. Undercover. His target. Selene's apartment. It was nearing midnight. No cars, no lights. And in the shadows below, a lone taxi pulled up. Out stepped Selene and Gregory Lang, arm in arm. The sight was like salt in a wound. He had failed twice tonight, and this time it was personal. Selene noticed him watching. Their eyes met, and then she disappeared inside. Damn, time for Plan C. At a m. Selene was jolted awake by insistent buzzing. Her phone vibrated in her hand. It was Gregory, voice shaky, eyes bleary. Selena, you have to see this. I tried calling you earlier, but your phone. His voice cracked. I tried to do the right thing, but I messed up. I swear. I only wanted to protect you. I forged signatures on documents, lied about taxes for the Graves family, did whatever Charles asked, and I kept quiet at the board meeting. I could have exposed everything then, but I froze. I'm sorry. I wish I'd done more. She sat up, rubbing her eyes. You did what you could, and that's enough. Get to my apartment. We need to talk. She threw on clothes, applied makeup, attempting a natural look that screamed, I woke up like this. Downstairs, she retrieved her father's old silver flask from the bar cart, poured herself a shot of whiskey, swallowed. Time to reclaim the night. Gregory reached her apartment minutes later, his face pale. Over cups of coffee, Selene learned of Charles's schemes over the past year. Secret shell companies, offshore accounts, even bribes paid to keep information from the board. But something was missing, a crucial thread that connected these dots, proving the motive, confirming the conspiracy. Gregory couldn't remember, and Selene knew it was because Charles had made sure of it. But she was close to the truth, close enough. As dawn bled into the sky, Selene drove to the one place left in her father's old study. She typed in a code on the bookshelf, revealing a safe. Inside, not cash or jewels, but a thick leather folder stamped Laurent Family Archive. The documents were substantial, the language archaic, detailing land rights and mineral leases dating back generations. She found what she was looking for, a faded contract from 25 years ago, signed by her grandfather, outlining a joint venture between the Lawrence and Gravises. Their companies would pool resources to bid on lucrative projects. If successful, profits would be split. If not, debts would be shared. She flipped through, heart sinking. The same signature on all of them, Charles's father, the late Jasper Graves. It was a partnership of equals, but the fortune her father had been bequeathed wasn't his alone. It was half owned by Charles's parents, which meant her father wasn't an independent billionaire. He was a partner in a highly leveraged enterprise, and when he died, his share didn't pass to Selene. It passed to Charles. It was a long con spanning decades. Her father worked with the family, blinded by his ambitions, never realizing that half his legacy belonged to someone else. And Charles had benefited from it all of it, and planned to benefit from Selene's share as well. Her knuckles were white. Where was he hiding the evidence? What was he planning to do? As the sun rose, casting long shadows over the city, Selene made her move. The first call was to the board. She needed time on the agenda to present her findings. Then to the press. It was time to show them who was pulling the strings. Cameras arrived. The boardroom was transformed into a studio. Cameras focused on the contract, on the men who signed it, on the fine print. Selene spoke for an hour, laying out every scheme, every lie, every betrayal. The board watched, dumbfounded, unable to refute a single word. Even Charles sat stunned, his empire crumbling around him. By noon, the meeting was adjourned. Selene strode out, the contract held high, and there in the hall, they found her, bruised but not broken. Desmond slumped in his chair, watching the live stream on his phone. Everything was unraveling. What could he do? The answer hit him, unexpected, brutal, and in hindsight, obvious. Grab what he could and run. He secured his valuables, cashed out offshore accounts, changed his SIM card, bought a new passport. He had one shot at redemption and it was risky. He flew to Dubai, assuming Selene wouldn't follow, and there anonymously, bought back the Bay Street property from her. It was revenge, a reminder, and a threat. Weeks turned into months. Selene, true to her word, launched a series of lawsuits, dismantling Charles's empire brick by brick. But the case was slow, frustrating. The Graves family rallied around their patriarch, so Selene fought on multiple fronts. First, she revamped Vincera, distancing it from her father's shadow, shifting focus to sustainable energy, smart cities, electric vehicles. She hired green architects, solar engineers, battery innovators. The company flourished, earning awards, attracting investments. She became a sought-after speaker, then an influential voice on climate action. Second, she played the long game with the board. While the lawyers dug through documents, she engaged the family, invited them to Vincera events, showed them the future she was building. One by one, they backed away from Charles. Finally, she took the fight public. Leaked emails, hidden offshore accounts, dubious contracts. She flooded the news cycle with proof of fraud, bribery, tax evasion. The Graves' name was dragged through the mud and Charles found himself alone. He stayed in his penthouse, barricaded inside. His guards were tense, the staff fearful, but Charles wasn't afraid. He had one last trick up his sleeve, the ace he held close since Selene left the family home. He had leverage over her past. How? Why? When? Who? Everyone wanted to know. What secret did Charles hold about Selena? The answer lay in the archives, in a box labeled personal. The contents were sealed, untouched, until now. Charles knew what was inside. Her childhood, her education, her early years. He could destroy her reputation, besmirch her image, cast doubts on her story. It would be messy, but it could work. So he started leaking, bit by bit, inconsistencies, contradictions, insinuations. Enough to tarnish her image, maybe even stall her lawsuits. The leaks gained traction, rumors spread, gossips discussed, and Selene found herself on the defensive again, having to issue denials, resurfacing old wounds that were finally healing. But this time, she was ready. It was easier to fight back against organized lies than dismantle subtle ones. Each accusation was addressed in court, each inconsistency debunked by witnesses. Her story remained intact. Charles was losing ground. And then one evening, as Selene prepared for a hearing the next day, she received a package, a box wrapped in brown paper. Inside, an old worn journal, the kind her father kept. The title page read, The Laurent Legacy Project. It was filled with entries chronicling her life from age 13, written by her mother. Love, loss, struggles, dreams, fears. It was her life laid bare, her identity. But what did Charles want with it? The answer hit her like a punch to the gut. It was blackmail. He had hoped to ruin her reputation with her own past, to damage the very essence of who she was. It was his final play. And Selene, instead of defending herself, struck back. She leaked excerpts to the media, allowing her mother's words to tell her tale. And as the public got a glimpse into her soul, her image only grew stronger. People saw a resilient young woman navigating the complexities of life, of grief, of purpose. They saw her vulnerabilities, her triumphs, her humanity. They saw themselves. In the end, it was her authenticity that won. Charles lost his board. Selene won. It's amazing how life works, isn't it? One minute you think you've got everything figured out. The next the ground shifts and suddenly you're staring at a new horizon. That is exactly how it felt for me when I stumbled upon a box of my grandmother's letters. I thought it was just another rainy Saturday, but boy, was I wrong. These letters weren't just old pieces of paper with faded ink. They were a portal to a past I never knew, a past that challenged everything I thought I understood about my family and myself. And let me tell you, my family is a complicated bunch. My Nana, bless her soul, was the calm in our family storm. Even when things got rough, she had this way of keeping it together, like a lighthouse amidst crashing waves. But these letters exposed a side of her I never saw, a fire, a strength, a passion that had been hidden for decades. And let's just say it wasn't always pretty. Now, if you're wondering why my Nana kept these letters a secret, well, let me introduce you to a character straight out of a classic drama series, my grandfather, bless his heart. The man was a walking contradiction. On one hand, he was a pillar of the community, respected, admired, the go-to guy for everything important. On the other hand, he had this habit of, shall we say, straying a bit. Yes, while he was having steamy affairs on the side, my sweet Nana was busy writing letters to her secret lover, pouring her heart out like there was no tomorrow. Talk about a plot twist. And here's where things get really interesting. My grandfather passed away when I was still figuring out what TikTok was, leaving my Nana to navigate the tricky waters of widowhood alone. But lo and behold, shortly after he was gone, she dusted off those very letters and burned them, leaving nothing but a pile of gray ash. You know, I couldn't help but wonder why. Was she protecting her image? Was it just too painful to remember? Or was there something deeper, something she wanted to keep buried? Well, as it turns out, I'm not the only one with questions. Enter my cousin, Olivia, who decided to crash our family reunion and stir up some drama. Now, Olivia, bless her inquisitive soul, has always been the curious type. If there was a mystery afoot, she was right in the thick of it. So naturally, when Nana passed away, she set her sights on those mysterious letters, you know, the ones that got the fiery treatment. Olivia, being the tech-savvy millennial that she is, managed to dig up some digital breadcrumbs. And guess what she discovered? Those letters had been scanned. Yep, someone out there had copies of my Nana's love letters, and Olivia was on a mission to find out who. Now, normally I'm all about minding my own business, but seeing Olivia squash like a bug in a rug, well, that got under my skin. Here's the thing, I might be a sucker for true crime documentaries, but when it comes to my family, I'm all in. Plus, there was something about this situation that smelled fishy. I mean, who scans old letters unless they're planning to blackmail someone? And if that wasn't enough, the timing was just too perfect. After Nana passed away, a bigwig from the local historical society showed up asking for donations. And you guessed it, he was particularly interested in my Nana's past. Talk about convenient. As I dug deeper, I uncovered something that shook me to my core. Turns out our seemingly respectable bigwig had quite the colorful history. In fact, he was public enemy number one in several counties over a scandalous real estate deal. But that wasn't all. He had a knack for sniffing out secrets and twisting them like pretzels to fit his narrative. Before long, he had spun a tale so outrageous it would make your jaw drop. According to his version of events, my Nana had written those letters to none other than the infamous Al Capone himself. And let me tell you, if you think mobsters are a thing of the past, think again. These guys are still lurking in the shadows, pulling strings like it is a never-ending episode of The Godfather. And let's not forget about my grandfather. Oh, he was just a poor unsuspecting banker caught in the crossfire. Well, not so fast. I had my doubts. I mean, Capone, really? But here's the kicker. My great-aunt, bless her heart, had mentioned something similar years ago. She hinted at a shadow family, a secret branch of the family tree that even we distant relatives didn't know existed. Could there really be a connection to the mob? And if so, why? As I chased these elusive shadows, I stumbled upon a hidden family tree in the attic, literally hidden. It was tucked away in a dusty trunk like a shameful secret. But once I spread it out on the table, I spotted a name that made my blood run cold. Vincent Sinclair, aka Jimmy the Clutch. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why does the family tree have a criminal nickname? Well, here's the twist. Jimmy the Clutch was not just a regular Joe. He was my great-great-grandfather. And apparently he had a thing or two in common with his distant descendant, me. See, Jimmy had a knack for sniffing out valuable properties and snatching them up before anyone knew what hit them. But unlike me, he wasn't above using a little force, a lot of shady dealings and an arsenal of aliases to pull off his schemes. And let's not forget about his buddy, Bruno the Shark DeLuca. Yep, you heard it right, DeLuca like in Luca Brasi, the enforcer from The Godfather. These guys were thicker than thieves, always cooking up schemes that would make even a seasoned mobster blush. I mean, they pulled off one audacious deal after another, all under the radar, all under false identities. You almost had to admire their audacity. But here's the part that really had me scratching my head. They were generous, like Santa Claus with a heart bigger than his girth. They donated generously to churches, schools, even charities, all while amassing a fortune in illegal gains. It was like they wanted to buy their way into heaven. But here's the million-dollar question: why? What was the end game here? Well, after poring over old newspaper clippings and deciphering cryptic handwriting, I uncovered the truth. Jimmy and his buddy Bruno weren't just playing Santa for fun. They were trying to clean up their shady past. They wanted to be seen as pillars of the community, even though they were as crooked as a politician's smile. Talk about a plot twist. Now, you might be wondering why they went to such lengths. Well, let me enlighten you. Back in the olden times, like the 1920s and 32nds, being a mobster wasn't exactly a badge of honor. Sure, Hollywood tried to glamorize it, but in reality, they were as welcome in high society as a skunk at a garden party. To avoid getting shunned like that per skunk, mobsters like Jimmy and Bruno resorted to disguises. They donned fake mustaches, changed their names, even altered their fingerprints. They were the ultimate chameleons of the criminal world. And here's where things get even more puzzling. Their secret identities often led them to places of power. They became influential figures in local politics, school boards, even religious institutions. It was like they were trying to infiltrate every aspect of society. But why? Well, my dear readers, it was all about control. By infiltrating these positions, they gained influence and leverage. They could manipulate decisions, make shady deals, and most importantly, protect their ill-gotten gains. It was a brilliant strategy, albeit highly illegal. As I peeled back layer after layer of my family's tangled history, I discovered a pattern that both fascinated and terrified me. Generation after generation, there was a recurring theme, a lust for power that drove my ancestors to extraordinary lengths. They craved recognition, respect, and most importantly, wealth. It was as if they were playing a never-ending game of catch-up, always striving to be accepted by the elite society they could never truly belong to. And let me tell you, they weren't afraid to get their hands dirty. Money laundering, blackmail, even arson. They employed tactics that would make Gordon Gekko blush. But throughout it all, they maintained this facade of respectability. They became pillars of their communities, leaving behind a trail of secrets and lies. Now, you might be wondering where I fit into this twisted family tree. Well, my path was different, but no less treacherous. I became a journalist, a seeker of truth, which made me the odd one out in a family where secrets were currency. But you know what they say, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Despite my chosen profession, I still carried that insatiable thirst for power, that desire to shape the world around me. But here's where the story takes a turn. Unlike my ancestors, I chose a different route, one that didn't involve smoke and mirrors. I embraced transparency, honesty, and hard work. But here's the irony. In my quest for the truth, I realized that my family's legacy was more than just a stain on my bloodline. It was a reflection of human nature itself, the constant struggle between darkness and light, secrecy and openness, power and authenticity. As I navigate the twists and turns of my own journey, I'm reminded of the choices that define us, the decisions that separate us from the shadows of our past. But let's face it, life's a messy labyrinth, and sometimes the only way out is through. So here's to embracing the chaos, learning from the shadows, and most importantly, staying true to who we are in a world that never ceases to amaze. The hum of the approaching train echoed through the metal detectors at the station. It vibrated up Lena's legs and squeezed her heart, squeezing the bile of anxiety into her throat. Each second ticked by too fast, too slow. What if he recognized her? Would she run the risk of a face-to-face encounter or use the hidden camera she had slipped into her bag to ensure her safety? The platform was crowded, yet lonely. People bustled around her, their conversations and laughter distant murmurs, disconnected. She felt exposed. As the train screeched to a halt, joining the dots of the city's glittering constellation, she made her decision. She would do this. For her, for everyone who'd believed in her despite her doubts, for the trust that Henry had placed in her. Pulling her coat tighter against the damp night air, she stepped onto the train, vanishing into the urban maze. She detrained 2 stops later, pulling her hood further over her head, hiding the sliver of a smile on her lips. The antique shop was tucked down a side street, its windows fogged over to obscure the interior from prying eyes. She pushed open the door, its chimes tinkling like a greeting. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of old paper and dust, and the dim lighting cast long shadows that danced on the walls. The place looked exactly as it had in the photo Henry had sent her. Selene, Henry said, the name leaving his lips like a question he feared the answer to. She tilted her head, just slightly, her voice calm. Henry, it's been a while. He nodded, unable to tear his gaze from her face. You look different. There was a beat of silence before he added awkwardly, you look different. I am, she said. Different is what happens when you survive betrayal. Before he could respond, the MC took the stage, announcing the highlight of the evening, a live auction to benefit women in corporate leadership. Selene smiled to herself. The irony wasn't lost on her. When her name was called as one of the guest sponsors, Selene stepped up to the podium. The lights shifted, framing her in gold. She took a deep breath, not out of nerves but control. I want to thank you all for being here tonight, she began. This cause is personal to me not just because I believe in empowering women, but because I've lived the opposite. I've been silenced in rooms where I had the most to say. I've been dismissed, undermined, and betrayed. But here's the thing about being underestimated, she continued. You learn how to listen. You learn how to plan. And eventually, you learn how to rise. A few people clapped. More followed. Henry's expression had turned from uneasy to pale. Charles was stone still. And tonight, Selene said, her voice cutting clean through the silence, I want to give back not just with money, but with truth. Because nothing is more dangerous to a corrupt empire than a woman who refuses to stay quiet. Behind the scenes, her team comprised of whistleblowers, an investigative journalist, and a skilled hacker named Mira had just triggered the final upload of confidential documents to a network of journalists. Financial fraud, bribery, corporate espionage, all leading back to Whitmore & Co. By the time Selene stepped off that stage, the headlines were already rewriting themselves. Henry tried to intercept her in the hallway, stammering something about explanations, misunderstandings, not knowing what Charles had done. But Selene didn't stop walking. You had a choice, she said over her shoulder. You just thought I'd never get a better one. Outside, as the night air kissed her skin and cameras flashed in admiration instead of exploitation, Selene didn't feel vengeance. There are moments in life when silence speaks louder than 1,000 screams, when vengeance, finally set in motion, walks with the slow, deliberate steps of a queen reclaiming her stolen throne. And Selene, wrapped in midnight blue silk and wearing the war paint of subtle red on her lips, stepped into that boardroom, not as the former assistant everyone had once dismissed, but as the force of fate itself, measured, merciless, and ready. She stood at the glass wall overlooking the city that had once swallowed her whole, the twinkling skyline now reflected in her cold, unblinking eyes. Behind her, the board members murmured among themselves, some barely able to recognize the poised woman before them as the same one they had watched being escorted out in humiliation just months ago. Selene didn't need to raise her voice when she finally spoke. The room leaned in to catch her every word, as if gravity itself had shifted toward her. Gentlemen, she began, turning with the grace of a seasoned performer, you once allowed a man like Adrian Vance to lead this empire into decay. Today, you'll witness what it looks like when the rod is cut out. There were documents in her hand-sealed files, email chains, financial irregularities that had the power to burn reputations to ash. With each page she laid out, the illusion of Adrian's integrity crumbled like a sandcastle before a rising tide. And when she turned to him, Adrian, pale and panicked, sweat lining his collar, his mouth moving with no sound, her voice lowered to a venomous whisper only he could truly understand. You took everything from me, my dignity, my future, even my belief in fairness, she said, eyes locked on his. But what you failed to understand is that I was never playing your game. I was building my own. The board was stunned into silence. The CFO, once Adrian's lapdog, shifted uncomfortably. The chairman, an old man with keen eyes, nodded slowly as if seeing the truth for the first time. The final blow came in the form of a vote, an emergency dismissal clause, unanimously triggered by the board. Adrian was out. Security didn't even need to be called. Adrian stood, defeated, his chest heaving, his eyes wild, as if searching for a way out. But there wasn't one. He hadn't seen this coming, not really. Selene watched him go without flinching. And just like that, the king fell. The morning sun filtered gently through the vast windows of Selene's new office. Casting golden light across the polished floors and the framed photographs, she had carefully arranged images of women who had once worked in silence and in shadows, now celebrated as leaders and changemakers. Selene didn't need to hang her own portrait. Her presence was enough. With Adrian gone and the rod exposed, Selene didn't merely inherit a position. She transformed it. She restructured the leadership team with precision, promoting overlooked talent, introducing transparency measures, and opening scholarship pipelines for women from underprivileged backgrounds who reminded her of the girl she used to be. But amidst the applause, the press coverage, and the whispered in corridors where her name was now spoken with reverence, Selene kept one thing untouched on her desk. A small battered notebook, the one she had used when she was just an assistant, scrawling ideas in between coffee orders and calendar bookings. It served as a quiet reminder that power gained without purpose was simply another illusion. On a rainy evening weeks later, as thunder cracked across the sky, Selene stood alone on the rooftop of the building that once imprisoned her ambitions. She closed her eyes and breathed in the storm. "I'm not who I was," she whispered to the wind. "I'm what you made me become." But it wasn't anger that fueled her anymore, it was clarity. Her story wasn't just about revenge. It was about survival, transformation, and the quiet, unstoppable rise of a woman who refused to stay forgotten. She turned away from the edge and walked back inside, her steps calm, measured, and irreversible. Epilogue. A lesson in fire. Selene's story is a reminder to anyone who has ever been overlooked, underestimated, or betrayed. Fire doesn't destroy the strong, it refines them. And to all those watching, wondering when it will be your time, remember, sometimes the best revenge isn't loud or brutal. Sometimes it's walking back into the room you were forced to leave, and being the one who decides who stays and who goes.